Yeah, okay. So this is our last topic. We're gonna talk about the Turkey's democratic model. So we're gonna cover the military coups and the Islamic secular nation Islam and secular nationalism in Turkey, and then the Kurdish question there. Um, so we need to go back to the week two when we talked about the settlements after the First World War, and we talked about the mandate and how the allies agreed to divide the Ottoman Empire, or to actually to they agreed to distribute the territories between them, and how these kind of the several agreement and the terms the terms of the agreements were very harsh, but it didn't get a chance to be implemented in reality. So here, according to these terms, according to several agreement, it was it tried to divide actually the original core of the Ottoman Empire. If you remember, we talked about this kind of how actually the Allied put the straits between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea under they removed these the administration of these straits from Istanbul Authority, and they actually placed this under their administration, and actually France and Italy as well. So they gained or they divided this southwest western Anatolia between both of them. So they had these kind of spheres of influence here, like France and Italy, and then Greece as well. It received these kind of the gained authority and presence in Izmir, the this kind of significant Anatolian port in Izmir, and actually it gained some sort of the territories that brought it much closer to Istanbul, the borders of Istanbul, and more important like equally important, according to the national self-determination. So the allies agreed to give Armenian and Kurd and the Kurdish people, or the Kurdish regions, kind of self according to the national self-determination. So this actually allowed them to offer a kind of independent a state for the Armenian in eastern Anatolia, and for the same went for the Kurdish regions of the eastern Anatolia as well. But actually, they didn't promise any sort of military or financial support, so that's why they both didn't endure so long. So these kind of harsh terms didn't they hadn't been implemented in reality, because even before the ratification or signing the treaty, by the end of 1918, um, like the right before these kind of secret societies and the resistance movement, national resistance movements in Turkey emerged, the presence of the allied, the controlled Istanbul and the Ottoman government. So even before signing this treaty, so the committee of union progress, the CPU, actually left the country, and the Ottoman, actually the Sultan Fahd-Din dissolved the parliament, and he ruled the country by decree. But actually, he didn't have any kind of sovereignty or control over his territories. So they had like exerted not only the presence, in the, or control over, the territories of the like former Ottoman Empire, but actually they had like, authority over like they had kind of financial authority. So the Sultan actually didn't have like control over the allocation of resources. So the Allied actually controlled and restored, the capitulations, that was the policies that were abolished, by the CUP at the beginning of the war. So actually he like lacked, like the government in Istanbul like lacked any kind of any sort of sovereignty over or territorial integrity, and any control over its finances and territories. So before the ratification of the treaties, like, some sort of events and the emergence of the nationalist movements, or the armed resistance, actually deemed it, void. um, so like some local groups or militants and guerrilla groups, Turkish groups, actually they were formed in order to resist, the occupation and the division of the territories in of the empire. So they were kind of volunteered militia. They formed like, militia units uh, in order to launch, kind of guerrilla wars against, the Allied and against the occupied authorities. Um, so they actually evolved into reorganized themselves, and evolved into like a national war for independence, especially after in 1919, after the arrival of like experienced former Ottoman commanders, including to organize the forces, including Mustafa Kemal Ataturk later. So actually, gradually, these kind of militia units and groups remolded into like kind of later, in a national army, but in an organized kind of organized forces, in order to launch, this national war for independence, and to gain like the sovereignty again over their territories. So actually, he asserted like Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Actually, he assumed, this leadership role, and he did lead, these the national movement. So the turning point came with the Greek when the Greece actually invaded Anatolia, and with this kind of invasion, actually, it offered an opportunity for different, militia units to unify themselves, or to unify, the resistance and the militia forces, in order and this actually raised the awareness of the Turkish people about the occupation, and about the invasion, and the unified, efforts in order to confront the Greek authority. Um, so like Greece actually, after like getting an approval or coordinated, with the allies, it actually invaded or penetrated, Turkey through Izmir, and launched like a brutal military operation and campaign against civilians, and against like, some Muslim like places and symbols, including mosques there. So by 1921, um, it actually the Greek forces actually captured the Bursa. It was like the former Ottoman capital, and they extended into so deeply into Anatolia. So this actually posed like serious threat to the national movement, including, its leader Mustafa Kemal. Um, so for his part, like, Ataturk had, tried um, to broaden, or to broaden, to attract, more supporters, and to broaden, his resistance base. So he actually took some serious measures in order to dispose, the or to actually to sideline or to neutralize, the government in Istanbul, firstly, by delegitimizing, its existence, and offering, some sort of legitimate representation of the national movement, in order to represent, the Turkish people. So the first move, came with the effort, um, with establishing, the National Assembly as a representative, body. So it actually it emerged in 1920, and it consisted of, like, some, uh, like the delegates, inside the assembly. Actually, they were chosen by the resistance groups, and some former parliamentarians from the dissolved, Ottoman Empire. Uh, so the actually in April 1920, so the deputies, of the assembly actually formed the government, and they nominated Ataturk as the president of the government. So they adopted or embraced, this principle of popular sovereignty. So that's why um, the adopted, the a constitution that contained the National Pact. And the National Pact was, like, very important because it laid the groundwork, for the future independent state, and it did, set the main principles upon which, the new independent states, like was built on. So according to the pact, actually, they made, like, kind of clear uh, renunciation, of any kind of territorial claims to the former Arab provinces. So they had no claims, to like former like Ottoman territories, especially in the Arab provinces. And the National Pact also, like, affirmed, the rights, of the full Turkish, sovereignty over the remaining territories, or the remaining portions, of the empire, that actually, like, populated by a Turkish majority. And they actually, they refused, any kind of recognition to the new Armenian Republic. So that's why the pact actually stipulated that, the authority or the popular sovereignty had to be extended to the portion of Anatolia that was given to the Armenian state, and actually with the help of the Soviet Union. So they coordinated efforts in order to divide, this the Armenian, Republic, or the territories, between both of them. And that was, like, the first stage of dismantling, Sevres Treaty. Um, so after this first step that actually undermined, the basis, of the treaty, and actually eroded, the harsh terms, um, after this joint, invasion between, like, the Soviet Union and Turkey. um, yeah, Ankara, actually, they established their own government in Ankara, and like, they got, like, kind of some sort of international recognition, especially firstly from France, and then from Italy. And then Italy agreed to withdraw its forces from southern, Anatolia. So it actually, it did withdraw, forces from, like, these kind of territory that was occupied, the territories that were occupied by the Italian forces. Um, so this actually offered, some space for the national movement to, again, to strengthen, or to reorganize themselves, in order to face, the Greek forces only, after, like, um, neutralizing, both France and Italy. So now they had, like, the one threat, came from Greek forces. So the resistance actually concentrated, or its efforts in order to reorganize, the militia units, and then they molded, these kind of units into a national army in Ankara. Um, and actually, and of course, like, Ataturk, he assumed, this the full command of the military operation, and he started, to launch, this military operations or attacks in August and September 1921. And in a year, he managed to push the Greek forces, back to Izmir, and actually he managed to force them out of the country in September 1922. So this actually created, like, kind of new facts on the ground, and this pushed, like, Britain and Greece and Turkey in order to negotiate, some sort of peace agreement, and they agreed, on armistice in October 1922, and they agreed, to have, like, kind of peace conference in order to negotiate, the final political settlement, or the final status of the Turkey, as of Turkey as, like, an independent state, and to renegotiate, the terms of the Sevres Treaty. Uh, so now the situation is, like, they had kind of two governments, one in Istanbul, like the former, like Ottoman Empire, and the Ankara, where, like, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, and his like fellows, established, their own government, and they gained some sort of recognition from different forces. So, like, in order to solve, this kind of double or dual, sovereignty inside the country, and to have, like, one representative in the peace conference, uh, so they actually Mustafa Kemal Ataturk actually pushed, the National Assembly in order to issue, a legislation in order to abolish, um, the Sultanate, to put an end, to the heritage or the legacy of the Ottoman Empire, and to turn, the Caliphate as kind of a symbolic and religious, kind of a religious office, without having any sort of political authority. And actually, he managed, to win them over, to his side, and to issue, this legislation in November 1922. This actually eliminated, the Sultanate, and actually the like the put an end, to the heritage, or to the period, or the long legacy of the Ottoman Empire in 1922. And then in Lausanne, actually, they had, like, another like, that was like the peace conference, that they had to renegotiate, the terms, and they had to come up with, like, new terms in order to establish their own, like, new independent nation state as Turkey. uh, so actually the like the Turkish delegation, actually the delegates, actually, they were very stubborn, and they persisted on, like, they actually insisted on their initial position of the national pact, actually all the terms of the national pacts, or the principles of the national pacts. So they had, like, to take it all. So that's why they actually pushed for full recognition, of the Turkish sovereignty over all the areas, or the remaining areas, left and claimed by the national pact. And actually, they got, like, these like the all the territories, they had claim to, except for the Mosul, in Iraq. So they actually they gained, the recognition, and they established their own independent nation state after um, like the dismantling and the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, the official dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. And now they had, like, the government had no kind of restriction um, uh, on its financial authority, except for the debt service, the obligation they had to pay in order to for the loans, they gained because of the financial crisis. And they had no restriction on their economic and diplomatic or domestic policies as well. So they gained kind of full sovereignty over their territories and full authority to formulate their own domestic policies, except for the Straits as well, because they remained under the international supervision, the administration of the international supervision units. And Turkey had full control over and sovereignty over the Straits in 1936. Um, so actually, he emerged, Ataturk actually emerged as the forceful leader that actually fought the war, the national war for independence. And he had a vision. So right after gaining establishing or gaining this kind of official recognition of the new new independent state. So he had to initiate some sort of radical reforms in order to that signified actually a significant rupture with the legacy of the Ottoman Empire. Uh, I referred to him when we talked about the political economy of development, and when we talked about how Turkey actually led this import substitution industrialization model. So as a military leader, he actually he graduated as well from the Imperial College in Istanbul. And he participated in the CUP movement against Abdul Hamid, the Sultan Abdul Hamid. And then in the First World War, he actually did well on the Eastern and Syrian fronts, that actually helped him to emerge as the well-known leader, and enhanced his prestige as well. So after gaining independence, in order to make this break with the Ottoman past, he had to he actually moved, he made Ankara as the capital instead of Istanbul, in order to have this distinction between the legacy and the heritage of the Ottoman Empire and the new republic or the new independent state. And he assured these kind of two principles of republicanism and popular sovereignty. And he actually he assumed the presidency actually until his death in 1938. So he crafted and drafted a new constitution that actually asserted this republicanism and populism, in addition to secularism and nationalism, and as we are going to see. And he established his own the one party system. It was the Republican People's Party, RPP. And for secular policies, in order, he abolished this minister of Awqaf, and the office of Sheikh al-Islam actually was abolished as well. And he tried to reduce these kind of religious practices in the public sphere. And the penal code or the civil code actually they were adopted and molded on the European style, or the European civil code. So especially Italian and German ones. So that was different from the civil code adopted under the Young Turk era and the Tanzimat as well. Because even during that period, the civil code actually had been based on Islamic Sharia. So it was not totally westernized or molded into this kind of or based on this kind of European civil code. So this actually offered more space for reducing, the Islamic organization, reducing the role of the Islamic institutions or Islamic organizations, especially in political and social matters. But actually, it was like very clear in urban areas, but in rural areas, actually, the people managed to evade, some of these restrictions, and it was very difficult to eliminate altogether, these kind of religious sentiments. And that was like very important when it comes to like nationalism. So like Ataturk actually tried to impose, some sort of uh, one identity that actually had no place for cultural pluralism. So this actually excluded like the any kind of Kurdish claim to have like, their own distinguished language or distinguished culture. So they had to be like remolded, and the reframed, they have to reframe, their identity within, this national Turkish identity. And this actually when they actually they had like three main uprisings, at least the most big ones, in 1925 and then 30 and 38. So they were like ruthlessly crushed, by Ataturk's governments, in order to because they had like, no, they had no space, for or like, they didn't show any kind of willingness to acknowledge, any sort of ethnic or cultural distinctiveness, of the Kurdish minority. So the government actually had to, like, in order to assert, this Turkish national identity, it had to crush, any kind of subnational identities or sub ethnic or cultural identities. So that was actually the state actually referred to them as officially, like, not as like Kurds, but as like, mountain Turks. So it denied, any sort of distinguished, cultural or um, ethnic character for the Kurdish people there. Um, so the actually the Republican Party actually dominated, the political landscape until the end of the Second World War. We talked about the import substitution, industrialization, and this kind of statism and populism, like the in the political economy week. Uh, so what happened, like, in 1945? Uh, it was like the Soviet Union actually threatened, the territorial integrity of the Turkish government, and the Soviet Union made claims to the Turkish territory, especially in eastern Anatolia. So this actually pushed, the United States to approach, the Turkish government, and in order to reject or to support, the Turkish government in its rejection, to the demands, and to assert its sovereignty in its confrontation with the Soviet Union. That was like during the period, it was like Truman Doctrine, like the United States offered like some military and economic aids in order to prevent, um, the communist threat from spreading or in different countries, and to the extent that it would send, troops in order to stop, any advance of communism. So that actually marked, a beginning, of like, but somehow like troubled, alliance between between Turkey and the United States in the post-war period. Um, so like the import substitution industrialization, it actually led to some sort of social and economic changes inside Turkey. Um, so like some sort of like, business community or business groups, they started to ask for more space, for private sector, and to downsize or to reduce, the intervention, to reduce, the size of the state and and its like, large scale interventionist policies. So they started, to ask for some sort of economic reform, but on the other hand, they had like, the peasants and the workers as well, that they actually relied more or less, on the state, interventionist policies and fiscal policies, um, in order to advance, to increase the productivity of the industrial and agricultural sectors. So they depended, on the state policies regarding industrial and agricultural sectors in order to increase, productivity and to increase, the living conditions of the workers and peasants. Um, so the Republicans actually started to offer, some degree of, or some space, for freedom, and this, like, the some of the a few members, from the RPP, they defected in 1946. So they defected in order to form their own like political party, and they did. So they formed, the Democratic Party. It didn't like the party gained like few seats in the National Assembly in 1946 elections, uh, but uh, but actually it marked, the beginning of the political competition and the multi-party system in Turkey, and it had like, and proved kind of healthy, for competition and for like, it was like important development in the Turkish political life that had like, some sort of consequences, for the polity structure and the political life there. So they had now some sort of like oppositional forces inside the National Assembly that would challenge the government policies, and this created kind of heated debates, over like the government policies inside the National Assembly. So they had like, some oppositional voices that would like challenge the government policies, and they might have like, different or alternatives, or like some sort of like different policies in order to communicate to the wide or the social basis. So they actually concentrated, the Democratic Party, or the people or the members, affiliated with the party. So they tried, to concentrate, like to organize, their efforts in order to build, grassroots, like organizations throughout the country, to create some sort of like branches, for the party in order to attract to gain some sort of mass support in order to get themselves prepared for the next elections. Um, and and despite the fact like they had some sort of like, they had like the same political program kind of like, the Republicans, but the Democratic Party managed to attract, some supporters, like especially from like popular classes, or like, the like people who were actually dissatisfied with the heavy presence, or uh, like the essence, of the Kemalist, doctrine, with the heavy existence or the presence of the state and its intervention in even like political, not only political, but individuals and social life. So they had like, dissatisfaction, with these policies, and the Democratic Party tried to capitalize or to invest, in these kind of um, disaffection, so the actually um, the they tried to, despite the fact they might not, they didn't need actually to give like, a role to the Islamic institution or Islamic organization, but actually they needed to make use of these kind of reactions against, the Kemalist doctrine, or this hardcore interventionist policies. Uh, so the actually so they had like, let me like think about this. Yeah, so they had like kind of contradictory goals. So they needed to minimize, the state role in the economy in order to attract, the emerging, private sector or business community. But at the same time, because like the majority of the like the popular classes, so they did need, some sort of state intervention as well. So it was kind of incoherent, electoral constituencies they tried to appeal to. uh, so they tried to like to manage, to or to balance out, these kind of needs between minimalist, role of the state in the economic domain, while the need, to undertake some sort of, or to enforce, some sort of uh, fiscal and economic policies in order to improve, the living conditions, of peasants and workers. And actually they managed to play into, this kind of dissatisfaction and anger. And in the 1950 elections, their message actually gained some sort of support and resonance amongst the Turkish people. And they gained like 408 seats out of versus, 69 seats for the Republicans. So that was actually like significant development, because after only 4 years from like it was founded in 1946, and after 4 years the party actually managed um, to make this kind of peaceful transition from one party to multi-party democracy. So actually the now, the Democratic Party had been in power, and they had to implement, their like political program. So firstly they had to relax, these kind of hardcore secular measures. So they allowed for these kind of allowed, these kind of rituals, or the appearance of this kind of Islamic rituals in the public sphere. So the Muslim prayers, and these kind of religious practices, especially in primary schools as well, they were legally permitted and allowed. And these kind of religious celebrations and Sufi orders and these kind of rituals as well, they were allowed by the government, and officially kind of authorized. Uh, so the and economically, so they were kind of committed to reducing the role of the state, and committed as well to like in addition to allowing, more space for the private sector. So they were committed, to undertaking kind of agricultural reform in order to improve, the living standards or conditions of the peasants in rural areas. So they minimized, the state intervention, but at the same time they increased, the state intervened in the agricultural sector in order to increase the productivity, and to by actually allocating more resources, to import for like, imported, some sort of expensive machinery needed, to increase the productivity of the agricultural sector, like tractors and building dams and irrigation canals and infrastructures as well, to connect, remote areas um, uh, or remote, geographical region to like commercial, agriculture. So the state actually needed to intervene physically in order to allocate more resources to increase the productivity of the agricultural sector, or to connect, different regions together in order to bring to get kind of integrated, or to get access, to the national market and the international market as well. and like they did level on they did well on this level, uh, but it actually led to like severe kind of fiscal problems later as well, because like the spending too much money without any kind of planning, like having these kind of contradictory economic and social policies without having any sort of planning, like allocating resources to import to import like consumer goods and expensive machinery that needed for the agricultural sector without like securing funds to pay for them. This led to like some sort of fiscal problems, and then the economic like the some sort of economic problems started to appear, and this increased the criticism um, that actually directed to the Democratic Party government, and they were kind of sensitive, to these kind of um, to the increasing, criticism, especially to the government policies, and this triggered, some sort of harsh crackdown, for the part of the government, the Democratic Party government. So they imposed like harsh measures in order to censor like press and to imprison journalists, and like they didn't allow for like this free um, expression of different opinions, and this actually the and like another move, they tried to use the army against their political competitors. So they tried to use the army in order to disrupt the electoral campaigns and rallies of the Republicans. So that was like very kind of irrational move, because it added to the existing social upheaval and like social unrest that started to surface because of the economic problems and increasing violence. And this actually led the army to take an action and to intervene in order to restore order. So the army actually seized control of Istanbul in 1960 and Ankara, and actually arrested the leading government officials without and promised the like one important feature of these kind of military interventions, that they just they didn't have like any interest in like retaining or remaining kind of in power, but they actually promised to each and every time actually they made these kind of promises of the to return the government, the reign of the government to civilians, and they actually did in a year, but after a kind of intervention in order to like to amend, either to amend the constitution, and then later in the 1991 in order to restructure the polity to eradicate the causes of these of this violence and social unrest. So this actually so the army actually handed over power in a year, but the national like the National Unity Council, under like the supervision of the generals, they actually claimed that they had to intervene in order to protect Ataturk principles and his like the reformist and democratic norms and values. And although like Ataturk tried to separate the army from politics, but actually it continued to play important role in as kind of a guardian of these kind of secular and democratic goals proclaimed by Kemal Ataturk. So the army actually, the National Unity Council actually drafted a new constitution, and the constitution was the revised one actually was approved in July 1961. So two like significant amendments, or were integrated into the this kind of revised constitution. So, firstly, it allowed for the emergence of another another chamber. So, like the structure became kind of Turkey had like kind of bicameral legislature. So they had like, in addition to the National Assembly, they had like the Senate as well. And then it included clauses that actually stipulated, the role of the army in protecting secularism and the principle of secularism and um, like the individual rights and the assertion of democratic goals and principles of Ataturk. Um, and of course, like, they committed, these kind of like harsh crackdown, on the former the government officials before returning power to civilians to rule. So in 1961, so the RPP was back in power, like in power. So they formed, this coalition government that it did last, for 3 years. So they had like they formed a coalition with a new party. It called like the Justice Party, and they both kind of dominated, the political arena until the like throughout, the 80s as well. Uh, until, the 80s, so throughout, the 60s and the 70s. So then, like, the so sorry, they had like, this kind of coalition government with the small parties, and then like the new Justice Party emerged in 1965, after, the RPP government, ended, its tenure. And they faced the same problem, this kind of increasing, social violence and unrest in Turkey, and the military had to intervene again after, like, for the second time in 1971. So what happened during that period, like from 61 till 71, it was like, some sort of significant democratic and social and political changes that actually resulted from this economic and social policies that led to, like, urbanization and the kind of migration from rural areas to urban areas. Um, so on a high level, of unemployment and um, this kind of diversity of interest that gave rise to different political institutions or different like political parties to represent, these kind of different interests. So this led to, like, the emergence of or increasing number of political parties during, the 60s and the 70s. So by the end of the 60s, in 1969, so 8 parties, were represented, in the gained seats, in the National Assembly. So the political, despite, the like the Republicans and the Justice Party dominated, they presented, the members, or the 2 parties, they represented, the 2 mainstreams, inside Turkey. But this didn't prevent, small parties, to emerge and to gain, some support of to attract, some voters or supporters to vote, to cast, a ballot for their candidates in the elections. And this actually prevented the 2 main parties from gaining, the absolute majority. So this actually obliged them to form a coalition. This actually added, one more layer, for instability of any government, to deal, with the to have, like, coherent social and economic policies, and to deal, with the rising political and social violence in society. So the military had to intervene again in order to put an end to the Justice Party government in 1971. Like, with the emergence of these kind of small parties, it became very hard to run the country. It became kind of ungovernable. In addition to the economic recession, these parties, they got engaged, in these kind of patronage, and like they had their own kind of social networks, especially even with the police and the state apparatus as well. So it became very difficult to deal, with the increasing violence in society. Uh, so the military had to intervene in order to put an end to this, like what they called, the political anarchy and the economic chaos. The police actually didn't manage to put an end um, to this disorder. So like the military under, like, the Turkish high command actually, this time, there had been no kind of power seizure. So they actually governed behind the scene, and they handed over, like they allowed, a civilian government to rule and to govern to run the affairs of the country. But actually that was under the instruction of the high command, or the armed forces. So they actually declared, this martial law. This allowed, the government to crack down on the militant, like leftist organizations, and to increase, the state control or the government control, and to implement, or to widen, the scope of the censorship, and to implement this heavy-handed tactics in order to restore order. But again, like, the this time as well, they just suppressed, um, like opposition and protesters and challengers. But actually they didn't actually eradicate, or they didn't dig out, the root causes, or the roots of the problem, of the violence that actually prevailed in the society during that period. So after 2 years, so they allowed, for a new elections. And the new elections in 1973, it allowed it paved the way for the Republicans again to reach power. But this time, they had to form, a coalition with the National Salvation Party. And this party actually, it's a conservative party. And it had like this kind of religious um, orientation. So they actually they appeal to, like, the Arabic language. And they had, like, this kind of hardcore Islamic principles that actually, or inherently actually, in conflict with the Kemalist, doctrine in Turkey. So that's why they called it kind of marriage of inconvenience between the Republicans and the National Salvation Party, that actually called for, like, Islamic revival in Turkey. So no wonder that this kind of coalition, didn't last for so long. So with the new cycle of violence and political upheaval, actually, and urban violence in 1970, um, uh, 75, um, the this led to, like, the fall or the collapse of the government. Uh, so, like, small parties remained, some sort of, like, uh, one of the main causes, of this kind of political instability in Turkey. So that's why when kind of a new round of violence erupted, in the end 70s, and this led to, like, the intervention of the army for the third time, in 20 years. This actually, uh, what added, like, two more factors actually added to the violence before, the intervention of the military for the third time. So you have here, like, the Kurdish separatists. We are going to talk in some detail, about the Kurdish question in Turkey. But actually they intensified their like violent activities, besides, the National Salvation Party that actually uh, called for implementation of Islamic Sharia and Islamic revival in Turkey. So the separatists actually they asked for, like, the establishment of their own state, and they started to intensify their political and violent activities in Turkey. So that's why the Turkish high command, had to, like, for the third time, intervene. And this time, they had to address, the causes of the main cause of the violence. So they had to undertake, some structural reforms, or like transformation in order to address these kind of the root causes of the violence and disorder. Um, so they actually took charge of the administration and the like legislative functions of the government. But again, they made it clear that they didn't. This is just to uphold, these Kemalist, principles and democratic goals. Um, but actually, to be like the authority to be handed over, to a civilian government later. But this time, they had to undertake, some sort of transformation in the polity structure in order to address the causes. So they had like, this kind of determination to restructure the political system. So in addition to like declaring the martial law and dissolving these militia trade unions and other leftist so they cracked down on the leftists. And that was very important because it left like kind of political void. That void actually was filled by like Islamic oriented political activities. It led to like the emergence of the Welfare Party and then the AKP later. And then they had to address the causes, so that's why they had to like the to implement kind of to draft like a new constitution. And this new constitution strengthened the position of the president, or it offered the president's kind of constitutional powers in order to appoint the prime minister and to have like more power in relation to the cabinet members, and then to dissolve the National Assembly as well. And because of the existence of the small party and the every now and then like they had like the problems that they posed on the mainstream parties and the instability of any coalition government, and in addition to the instability of the or their kind of appeal to some sort of social basis as well. So this reduced actually the representation, the electoral reform was introduced in order to reduce the representation of the small party or their influence inside the National Assembly. This actually put like electoral threshold of 10% for any small party or for any party like to get at least 10% of the national vote in order to get some sort of parliamentary representation to enter the National Assembly. So they had to get this, and this actually gave. In addition to these like two reforms, the government actually had the authority to tighten its control over like the press and the universities and the trade unions. So that was actually suppression. And in addition to the repressive and these kind of repressive measures, the military this time offered some sort of restructuring of the political system. And the constitution actually got approved in a referendum in 1982, and this allowed for the 1983 elections. So by actually cracking down on like the leftist organizations, and during that period like Islamic revivalist as well, that like the Islamic organizations that actually called for Islamic revival. So this actually gave more space for centrist and right of center parties to actually to dominate the political landscape throughout the 80s. So like during that period, it was like the Motherland Party and Uzel actually he managed actually to govern in two terms, and he introduced this kind of conservative or like right wing kind of centrist and right of centrist the policies that actually that was based on like free market policies and offering privileges to private sector and enabling on reducing or downsizing the role of the state in the economic domain. So that was like, during the 80s, but starting from the 90s, the ideological map, changed a little bit with the emergence of Islamic parties. So the like this kind of like Islamic oriented or religious oriented parties, uh, they were used, by the military or the like the national council in order to counterweight, the leftist ideology. So by using them in order to offset or to balance out, the ideological presence or the ideological weight of the leftist, um, this actually led to like it didn't eliminate actually despite even, the ban throughout the 80s, but actually still they had some sort of supporters that they bought into, this kind of religious discourse. So they were not able actually to eradicate, the causes or the roots, of these Islamic activities. So reformist, Islamic oriented organizations actually they made use or capitalized on this kind of the policies that allowed for like compulsory courses, on religion in state schools, in primary schools. So this actually like offered kind of a foundation, for these religious sentiments to be kind of played into for them, to play into later. And this actually attracted, especially some supporters from poor areas and neighborhoods. And they in 19 so in 1990s, like the still like the rightist, true path party, and the continuation of the free market policies. And this led to like some dissatisfaction from peasants and workers, that they grow kind of dissatisfied with the existing social and economic policies. And this allowed, or offered some space with the absence of any kind of leftist organizations. So this allowed like, Islamic activity, Islamic organizations and Islamic oriented parties, in order to attract, these to appeal to these like social basis, and to embark on like, a program that emphasized, social equality and social welfare, besides, the Islamic, character of the state. So the most important party during that period was like the welfare party. Arbakan actually gained like his party gained like 20%, 21% in the 1995 elections. So he entered, the parliament, and gained some parliamentary representation by the mid 90s. And he was kind of a provocative, character, because during that period, he actually embarked on, a program that emphasized, this Islamic, character of the state. And he actually made like it remained kind of an issue because of like, the this kind of principle of secularism actually. And he visited Iran, and repeatedly emphasizing, this Islamic character of the state. And this provoked, the military again. Now the military as an institution, it has constitutional authority to protect, the democratic principles or democratic goals of Ataturk. So in 1997, perhaps he crossed, the line. So that's why the Turkish high command again pressured him to resign. And he actually did. And the 1 year after, the constitutional court actually banned the welfare party, and actually prevented them, like Arbakan and some of the party members, from practicing politics, for quite some time. Um, so but it didn't, like, that was not, the end of the political Islam in Turkey. because in 2002, like Erdogan and the AKP, the Justice and Development Party, made kind of remarkable victory, and they dominated until now, the political landscape. Uh, so, like the Turkish High Command actually couldn't control, this kind of, despite, the different, policies and attempts to limit, the spread of this Islamic political activities, but they were not able, like the military was not able, to control, these religious sentiments. And the AKP actually got like 363 from 550 of the seats in 2002. So the AKP actually campaigned on a platform that emphasized, this welfare and social programs, besides, moderate Islamic orientation. So that was like in the 2002 and throughout the, 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 the first, 10 years of AKP governance. So he put like the party actually put an emphasis on stable like economic growth, and the actually led to like like sustained period of stable economic growth. And the party actually committed itself to like facilitating, investment policies and different, economic policies uh, that feed back into this stable economic growth that actually improved, the and led to their like repetitive, victory in the elections in the last actually 5 or 6 years. It actually shifted, towards, as we are going to see, this kind of elected, authoritarianism, as we are going to see next lecture in some detail. But actually the AKP actually put an emphasis on this kind of economic performance. And for the foreign policy, and we covered this somehow when we talked about, the international politics of the Middle East. He like the AKP actually adopted, this policy of zero problems, with neighbors. And that was like perhaps like because of the plan, to join the EU and to build, profile in order to convince to prepare for the negotiation, for to join the EU. So that's why they had like to make, some sort of like, like political move in order to improve, the profile of the Turkey in relation to the Kurds, for example, and to improve, the human rights record, and for the economic performance as well. But it didn't last, because like with the outbreak, of like, if you remember, like Taqsim, square like demonstrations, and how Erdogan actually cracked down on the protesters. And then after the coup attempt, the failed, attempt in 2016, he harshly like cracked down on opposition, and he undertook series, of repressive measures that actually tightened the state control over social media and press, and expanded even the power of the security and the intelligence agencies. And it had like, poor record, when it comes to freedom of expression, and it had like, large numbers of journalists that actually imprisoned because of their different or challenging opinions. And for the Kurdish question, as we are going to see next lecture, he tried to promise, some kind of uh, like advance with the or progress, with the peace process with the Kurdish people, and promised, some sort of constitutional amendments. But these kind of um, like promises, and these kind of negotiations and talks, between the Kurdish party and the Kurdish people and the state actually broken off, especially because of the escalation of the violence in Syria that complicated, the domestic situation inside Turkey, and that actually sharpened, this kind of dilemma over how to handle, the Kurdish question. Um, so next lecture we're gonna talk more about this Kurdish question and this kind of we're gonna cover, the regime under, Erdogan, and how this the presence, of the army, and how it actually the question of democracy with the existence, of the army that repeatedly claims, the position of the guardian of this Kemalist principles or Ataturk doctrine, and like the political Islam in Turkey as well, and to what extent it actually slided into this kind of electoral authoritarianism, and what kind of repressive measures, have been taken in order to silence out any kind of opposition voice. Okay, so see you next lecture. Bye.